Imagine standing on the precipice of the greatest victory in human history, only to realize that the war was the easy part. 2,800 years ago, the blind poet Homer composed a narrative that has shaped the Western consciousness, not because it is a story of monsters and magic, but because it is the ultimate case study in human resilience and the devastating cost of survival. While the Iliad explored the rage of Achilles and the brutality of combat, the Odyssey turns its gaze inward, examining the shattered psyche of a veteran trying to find his way back to a life that no longer exists. We are not merely retelling the story of Odysseus today. We are dissecting the strategic decisions, the catastrophic failures of leadership, and the psychological warfare that defines the 10-year journey of the King of Ithaca. To understand the journey, we must understand the man. Odysseus was the architect of the Trojan horse, the strategist who ended a decade of stalemate with a single act of devious brilliance. He proved that intellect could conquer brute strength. Yet as he stood on the burning shores of Troy, looking toward the horizon, he was not a conqueror, but a man desperate for the normalcy of his wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus. He believed the return trip would be a simple voyage across the Aegean. He was wrong. What awaited him was a decade of deconstruction, where the universe would strip him of his ships, his men, his pride, and nearly his mind. The journey begins not with a monster, but with a mistake of management. Flushed with the adrenaline of victory at Troy, Odysseus and his fleet of 12 ships do not head straight home. Instead, they raid the city of Ismara, home to the Teucones, allies of Troy. This is the first critical failure of the post-war mindset, the inability to deactivate the soldier. They plunder and feast, ignoring Odysseus's command to retreat immediately. This hesitation allows the Teucones to regroup with reinforcements, leading to a bloody skirmish that costs Odysseus 6 men from every ship. It is a lesson in the dangers of overconfidence and greed, a theme that will haunt the fleet repeatedly. They flee, battered not by the sea, but by their own lack of discipline. Nature then intervenes with a violent storm, blowing the fleet off the map and into the realm of the surreal. They land on the coastline of the Lotus Eaters. If the Teucones represented the physical danger of war, the Lotus Eaters represent the psychological danger of peace. The inhabitants offer the crew the lotus flower, a potent narcotic that dissolves memory and ambition. The men who eat the fruit do not die, they simply cease to care. They forget their homeland, their families, and their purpose. For a weary soldier, the temptation to forget the trauma of war is overwhelming. Odysseus displays his first act of true leadership here, not by fighting a beast, but by physically dragging his weeping men back to the ships and tying them to the rowing benches. He recognizes that the death of the mind is just as final as the death of the body. The fleet sails on, eventually spotting the land of the Cyclops. Here, Odysseus makes a strategic error driven by curiosity and arrogance. Instead of avoiding this lawless land, he takes a small shore party and investigates a massive cave filled with cheeses and lambs. They linger too long, waiting for the owner to return. The owner is Polyphemus, a giant son of Poseidon, who seals the cave entrance with a boulder so massive that 22 wagons could not move it. The dynamic here shifts instantly from exploration to a hostage crisis. Polyphemus is a creature of pure id. He has no laws, no hospitality, and no fear of the gods. To demonstrate his indifference, he smashes 2 of Odysseus's men against the rocks and devours them raw. Trapped in the cave, Odysseus realizes he cannot win through force. Killing the giant while he sleeps would be suicide, as they could never move the boulder to escape. He must engineer a psychological victory. He offers the Cyclops potent, unwatered wine, a vintage so strong it acts as a tranquilizer. As the giant intoxicates himself, he asks for the stranger's name. In a stroke of linguistic genius, Odysseus replies that his name is Nobody. When Polyphemus collapses into a drunken stupor, Odysseus creates a weapon, sharpening a massive olive wood stake and hardening it in the fire. With the combined strength of his remaining men, they drive the red-hot stake into the Cyclops' single eye, blinding him. Polyphemus screams for help, rousing his neighbors. When the other Cyclops gather outside the sealed cave and ask who is hurting him, Polyphemus screams, "Nobody is killing me!" The other giants, thinking he is mad or afflicted by a sickness from Zeus, walk away. It is a triumph of wit over strength. The escape that follows is equally brilliant. Odysseus ties his men to the underbellies of the giant's sheep. When the blind Polyphemus feels the tops of the sheep to let them out to graze, the men pass underneath, undetected. However, survival is not enough for Odysseus. He craves recognition. As they sail away, safe from the giant's reach, Odysseus's ego takes over. He shouts back to the shore, revealing his true name and address, taunting the blinded beast. This act of hubris, excessive pride, is his undoing. Polyphemus prays to his father Poseidon, invoking a curse that will define the rest of the saga, that Odysseus should lose all his companions and return home late and broken. The physical battle was won, but the strategic war against the gods was lost in a moment of vanity. The curse begins to manifest almost immediately, though in subtle ways involving the failures of his crew. They reach the floating island of Aeolia, home to the keeper of the winds, King Aeolus. The king treats Odysseus with hospitality and provides a shortcut home, a leather bag containing all the chaotic winds of the world, leaving only the gentle west wind to blow them toward Ithaca. They sail for 9 days. They are so close to home they can see the smoke rising from their own hearths. But Odysseus, exhausted from steering the ship alone, falls asleep. His crew, suspicious and jealous, believe the bag contains gold that Odysseus is hoarding. They open it, unleashing a hurricane that blows them all the way back to Aeolia. It is a catastrophic failure of trust. Odysseus failed to communicate with his men, and that silence cost them their homecoming. Aeolus, seeing them return, realizes they are cursed by the gods and banishes them. Despondent, they row to the land of the Laestrygonians. If the Cyclops was a singular threat, this is a massacre. These are giant cannibals who do not engage in dialogue, they simply destroy. They bombard the fleet with boulders from the cliffs. In a matter of minutes, 11 of Odysseus's 12 ships are sunk, the men speared like fish and eaten. Only Odysseus's ship, which he had prudently anchored outside the harbor, escapes. The grand fleet of Ithaca is gone. They are now a single, traumatized crew drifting in a hostile ocean. The solitary ship washes up on the island of Aiaia, home to the sorceress Circe. The psychological theme here shifts to the nature of humanity itself. Circe drugs a scouting party of Odysseus's men, turning them into swine. This transformation is metaphorical as much as it is magical. The men, broken by trauma and lacking discipline, are reduced to their basest animal instincts, all appetite and no reason. Eurylochus, a second-in-command who stayed behind, runs back to warn Odysseus. On his way to confront the witch, Odysseus encounters Hermes, the messenger god, who provides him with a counteragent, a holy herb called moly. This herb allows Odysseus to resist Circe's magic, symbolizing the divine protection of wisdom against base temptation. He overpowers Circe, forcing her to restore his men to human form. However, the victory leads to another delay. Circe, impressed by this mortal who can resist her, takes Odysseus as her lover. The crew lives in luxury for a full year, feasting and drinking, time slipping away in a haze of comfort. It is his men who finally have to remind him of his duty to return home. The hero has become complacent. Before he can leave, Circe tells him he must do the impossible. He must travel to the underworld to seek the advice of the blind prophet Tiresias. This is the catabasis, the descent into hell. Every true hero in mythology must face death before they can be reborn. In the land of the dead, Odysseus sacrifices a ram and calls forth the spirits. He sees his own mother, Anticlea, who died of grief waiting for him. He cannot embrace her ghost. It is a moment of profound sorrow that hardens his resolve. Tiresias appears and offers a grim prophecy. They will face the island of the sun god, and if they harm the cattle there, doom is certain. Armed with the knowledge of the dead, Odysseus returns to the sea to face a gauntlet of terrors. First are the sirens, creatures whose song promises knowledge and wisdom to any who hear it, but lures them to rot in a meadow of bones. Odysseus, wanting to experience this forbidden knowledge without dying, instructs his men to plug their ears with beeswax. He alone is tied to the mast, eyes wide open, ears unplugged. As the ship passes, he screams and struggles, begging to be released, seduced by the promise of the song. His men, following his previous orders, bind him tighter. It is a tableau of leadership. The leader must bear the burden of knowledge and temptation, while the crew focuses solely on the mechanical task of survival. Next, they face the Strait of Messina, flanked by two horrors, Scylla and Charybdis. Charybdis is a living whirlpool that swallows the ocean 3 times a day. To sail near her is total destruction. Scylla is a 6-headed monster living in the cliffs who snatches sailors from the deck. Circe had advised Odysseus that it is better to lose 6 men than the whole ship. This is the terrible calculus of command. Odysseus steers them towards Scylla, but crucially, does not tell the crew what is coming, fearing they would stop rowing and hide. As they watch the whirlpool in terror, Scylla strikes from the other side, devouring 6 of his strongest warriors. They scream his name as they are lifted into the rocks. It is the most traumatic moment of the journey for Odysseus, a choice he made that directly resulted in the death of his friends to save the mission. Broken and grieving, they land on Thrinacia, the island of the sun god, Helios. A storm pins them there for a month. Their supplies run out. While Odysseus sleeps, again, a failure of vigilance, his starving men slaughter the sacred cattle of the sun. They choose immediate survival over divine law. The consequences are instant. As they finally set sail, Zeus strikes the ship with a thunderbolt to appease the sun god. The ship is obliterated. The entire crew drowns. Only Odysseus survives, clinging to a piece of wreckage, drifting alone in the vast, indifferent ocean for 9 days. He washes up on Ogygia, the island of the nymph Calypso. Her name means to cover or to hide. She falls in love with him and keeps him as her prisoner lover for 7 years. She offers him what every human craves, immortality and eternal youth. But Odysseus spends his days sitting on the rocks, staring at the sea, weeping. He rejects the fantasy of a perfect, deathless life in favor of his rugged, painful, mortal reality in Ithaca. He chooses the struggle of being human over the ease of being a god. Finally, the gods intervene, forcing Calypso to release him. He builds a raft and sets sail, only to be smashed by Poseidon one last time, washing up naked and battered on the shores of the Phaeacians. The Phaeacians, master mariners, hear his story, the very story we have just traced, and agree to transport him home. He arrives in Ithaca asleep, 20 years older than when he left. But the kingdom is in chaos. Believing him dead, 108 suitors have invaded his palace, eating his food, drinking his wine, and pressuring Penelope to remarry. They are parasites, plotting to kill his son, Telemachus. Odysseus does not storm the palace. He utilizes his greatest weapon, patience. Athena disguises him as an old, filthy beggar. He infiltrates his own home, enduring the abuse and mockery of the suitors. He tests the loyalty of his servants, finding who has remained faithful. He reveals himself to his son, and together they plot a surgical strike. Penelope, running out of time, announces a contest. She will marry the man who can string Odysseus's massive composite bow and shoot an arrow through the handle holes of 12 axe heads lined up in a row. It is a feat only Odysseus could perform. The suitors try and fail, unable to even bend the weapon. The beggar asks for a turn. Amidst laughter, he inspects the bow, strings it effortlessly, and sends the arrow flying through the axes. The disguise drops. The beggar becomes the king. The hall turns into a slaughterhouse. Odysseus, Telemachus, and 2 faithful servants seal the doors and execute every single suitor. It is brutal, bloody, and absolute. It is the re-establishment of order through violence. With the house cleansed, he finally reunites with Penelope. She tests him one last time, asking a servant to move their bed. Odysseus snaps that the bed cannot be moved because one of its posts is a living olive tree rooted in the ground, a secret only they shared. The journey ends not with the battle, but with the quiet recognition between husband and wife. The Odyssey is more than an adventure. It is a testament to the idea that home is not just a place, but a construct of memory, loyalty, and identity that must be fought for every single day. Odysseus has returned, scarred and changed, but he is finally, truly home.